With that, I would now like to formally begin today's conference and introduce Mariana Pardo, Director of the HubZone program.
This is Mariana Pardo from the HubZone program, and today is part one of two webinars that we're conducting. The second one would be on December 17th and deals more with the contracting part of it. So without further ado, let's look at what we are going to be talking about today. We're going to be discussing and understanding a little bit better the HubZone areas, the criteria for designation of these areas. We are also going to learn how to use the maps to locate difficult addresses. We are also going to cover the HubZone program requirements and, most importantly, the best practices, not only for obtaining the certification, but also for maintaining it. And we are going to dedicate some time at the end for questions and answers. The HubZone program is an acronym. It stands for Historically Underutilized Business Zone. These areas are typically areas of low, median household income, and the program is designed to help economically distressed areas, revitalize these economically distressed areas. And the importance of understanding the intent of the program is because it helps the firms to understand the purpose of the regulations, and understanding the regulations helps the firm maintain eligibility. At any given time, there are about 5,000 small businesses certified as HubZone firms. And the reason why this is important is because obviously receiving the HubZone certification significantly decreases the pool of competition. So if I have a firm that I have been successful in obtaining contracts through the federal government, obtaining the certification is going to lessen that pool of competition and place me in a better competitive advantage. Now, maintaining this particular certification demands a lot of management, and that's what we're doing today. We're going to understand it a little bit deeper so that you can manage this certification. This certification does not expire. A company can maintain certification as long as they meet all the requirements. The companies do undergo a 3-year recertification, but so long as they maintain the criteria, the program will keep them in as certified concerns. The purpose of the program is to provide a vehicle for federal contracting. So as I mentioned, the firms that obtain these certifications are able to bid on contracts that are set aside for HubZone certified firms. The purpose of the program was to increase, and is still to increase, the employment opportunities of individuals that are residing in HubZones, to stimulate capital investment in areas that are economically distressed, and to empower the communities through economic leveraging. The importance to know this is, for example, when we're talking about, later on you're going to see the definition of the principal office. When we defined the principal office, we define it as a location where the greatest number of the employees work from. Obviously, this excludes those firms that are working in the areas of service or construction, where the majority of the employees are actually working in job sites. But nonetheless, the program requires, even for this type of industries, it requires that at least one employee is working out of this HubZone location. And why is that? Well, obviously, is to stimulate that capital investment, which is one of the purposes of the program, meaning that if I have an employee in that HubZone location, that employee is going to perhaps buy lunch across the street, drop off the dry cleaning next door, etc. The capital investment obviously can also be enhanced by restoring an abandoned site to accommodate the workers from my firm. There are 4 kinds of HubZones. And this is very important to understand, since the HubZones are geographical areas that have been deemed to be economically distressed. And if you could think about the HUB zone areas as layers, so there could be one on top of the other. These are the 4 qualified HUB zones. We have qualified non-metropolitan counties, which includes the difficult development areas. The difficult development areas are areas that are located outside of the continental USA. So for those firms that are located in Alaska, the Virgin Islands, Guam, Hawaii, Puerto Rico, they may see difficult development areas on top of having a non-metropolitan county qualified. There's also qualified census tracts, and the qualified census tracts are areas in non-metro counties and counties. These are pockets throughout the whole country, inside the mainland and outside the mainland, that are considered to be HUB zones. Indian land is another designation. All Indian land is qualified as HUB zone, and qualified base closure areas. We call them BRACs. These are bases that have closed under the Base Realignment Act, and the base closure areas become HUB zone the moment that flag goes down, and they remain HUB zones only for 5 years from that time. That is their lifespan, 5 years. Indian land never expires, but as you see their asterisks in the qualified census tract, in the qualified non-metropolitan county, including the difficult development areas. Those 2 with the asterisks are areas that when they expire, when the data that SBA uses no longer supports these areas to be HUB zones, these areas must remain designated as HUB zone for 3 additional years. The regulations call them redesignated. So these, whenever you go to the map and you see, you put in an address and you see that address, the result is that this area is no longer a HUB zone, it doesn't meet the criteria, but it's being redesignated for 3 years, it's basically giving the company a heads up that this area is doing slightly better than before when it first became a HUB zone, and eventually is going to expire, unless, obviously, it becomes newly designated. So as you could see, they are, the areas are not static. So it is extremely important for the firms that are considering this certification, or firms that are already certified, to assign someone in the firm that would be monitoring this requirement. The requirement being that at least 35% of the employees in the firm must reside in these areas, and we're going to cover this a little bit longer. So it means that someone in the organization is going to have to be using the HUB zone maps quite often, whenever someone is hired, whenever someone is leaving the company, etc. It's also very important to remember that SBA does not designate the HUB zones. These are designated by outside agencies. The non-metro counties, SBA uses data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics and also the American Community Survey. The qualified census tract, basically these qualified census tracts are deemed to be qualified based on analysis done by the Housing and Urban Development. The maps, these are the maps that you are going to be interfacing quite frequently in order to manage and make sure that the company does not lose compliance on two fronts. One, making sure that that principal office where the company is located is in a HUB zone, and if it is redesignated, when does it expire, and what type of plans, what type of strategies can I put in place so that the expiration of this redesignated area is not going to negatively impact my certification. And my employees, I need to always make sure that I keep a spreadsheet, making sure that I'm monitoring that. Now, If you want to bookmark the HubZone maps, please do not bookmark the maps themselves. There is a particular page in the website which is the HubZone. It says HubZone Maps, and when you click in the HubZone Maps, it's a landing page. That landing page is extremely important because whenever we make a change, we add an Indian land, we add a BRAC, a new non-metro county was qualified, we update that page first just to give a notice to those visitors that come in. There's also, you can sign up for email news and send notices on that. And then you're able to at least understand that there is an update, and subsequently the maps will be updated. But it takes us anywhere from 60 to 90 days to eventually update the geographical map. Now, one of the things that I wanted to point out here is this particular entry here. And this is for locating difficult to find addresses. This is something that here in the HubZone office we use all the time. There are addresses around our country that have not been geocoded, or they've been geocoded, but whenever you're plotting the address, you put the address, it plots it not in the proper place. Maybe it plots it across the street, it may plot it maybe a mile up. So using the coordinate input will help you zero in the correct area. And that is extremely important because, again, this certification, 2 out of the 4 requirements are contingent on this geographical area. So it's extremely important to be very correct as to where that particular address is. The coordinate input, the information and instructions on how to enter the longitude and the latitude of a particular address is located in the map landing page of the HubZone program. You will all be receiving copies of these slides, and in the slides there are hyperlinks that will take you to the website and will guide you. But there is a geocoding toolkit that you can actually open up in the map landing page, and it will give you instructions as to how to locate that longitude and latitude. And then you basically click in the coordinate input, opens up another type of fields that basically where you're going to be able to put longitude and latitude and then find, and it'll place it where that address is. Let's look at the HubZone eligibility requirements. Obviously, the firms must be small under SBA standards. This is something that is fairly straightforward. If a company has affiliated firms owned by the same individual or owned by a spouse, etc., what you need to do to make sure that the applicant firm or the firm that is already certified is small is look at that primary NAICS code for the firm that is certified as a HubZone or will be applying for certification, and determine that primary NAICS. And if that primary NAICS is based on revenues, for the last 3 years, you calculate the revenues on the applicant firm or the HubZone firm, and then you look at the revenues for the affiliate. And then you add them, basically, and see if it meets that height threshold. NAICS, revenue-based NAICS can go anywhere from, it can go as high as 33 million and up. So you need to do that to make sure that that the firm will be meeting the small business standard. There's going to be the hyperlink to the regulations so that you can understand a little bit more. And in the SBA website, there is more information about calculating size. The other 3 are the ones that we're going to spend a little bit more time. The firm needs to be owned and controlled at least 51 by a U.S. citizen or a community development corporation, an agricultural cooperative, or an Indian tribe. The firm must also have the principal office located within a designated HubZone. Remember that when we are talking about designated HubZone, it also includes those HubZones that expired, but now they need to be redesignated for 3 years. So, for example, if I apply on August of 2014, and the address where my principal office is located and a couple of my employees' addresses are in an area that expires October 2014, obviously that presents a risk factor for me, because even if I receive the certification before this area expires, I am going to be out of compliance. And as we will learn a little bit later, you as a certified firm have the obligation to tell the federal government, to tell SBA when you fall out of compliance, because there's no provision in this certification for falling in and out of compliance. So it is extremely important to make to look at the strategies that you can develop to alleviate the chances of the firm losing the certification, and we'll discuss this in a minute. At least 35% of the employees must reside in a hub zone. That's the other. These last two bullets are the ones that are predicated, obviously, on those geographical areas that we were discussing. Now, it is important to note that there are different rules that apply for tribal governments, Alaskan Native corporations, community development corporations, and small agricultural cooperatives. In this webinar, we're just talking about the companies that are owned and controlled at least 51% by U.S. citizens. Now, it is very important for you to know these statistics, because unfortunately this is what we experience in SBA. We see that about 85% of the firms who are declined on their application for certification or decertified after being certified are declined or decertified because of failing to meet either the 35% hub zone employee residency requirement or the principal office, or both. So with some planning, many companies can actually be in a stronger position not to lose this certification. And we've seen best practices which we will share today. The 35%, the definition of employee, the definition of the 35% hub zone employee residency requirement is based on how SBA defines employee. Most important thing is when you are calculating if your firm is meeting this requirement, just do not pay attention as to where the particular employee actually works. This is strong here. Don't pay attention to where the employee works. You only pay attention to where the employee lives. Make sure that you concentrate where the employee lives. Particularly those firms that are in service or construction, you're going to see that you have employees working at job sites, at your customer sites. When you are calculating this residency requirement, don't focus as to where the employee works. Just look at where the address is of their home. So an employee is someone that I, as a firm, employ, meaning that I pay, and they work a minimum of 40 hours per month. Okay, 40 hours per month. So this includes employees that I may obtain from a temporary employee agency, from a leasing concern, or through a union agreement. Also includes employees that I may be co-employing pursuant to a professional employer organization agreement that I may have as a firm. So the one thing that is very important, depending on the industry that you are at, is to know how the firm hires employees. If you are in a seasonal type of industry, you are going to have to really pay attention and manage this properly, because you know that perhaps in the summer, spring, summer, and fall, that's where you start really ramping up and hiring a lot of employees. And you may be putting at risk this particular requirement. So the ways to really lessen the likelihood of falling out of compliance is to make sure that the core staff, the staff that basically is permanent, and I don't hire according to the seasonal changes, that I have the majority of those or all of them residing in a hub zone. So if I need to hire 5 more individuals or however many, that I still will maintain that 35% requirement, because again, there's no provisions for falling in and out of compliance. And if I cannot do that, then I need to wait and do not apply for the certification because I know that I'm not going to be able to maintain this certification. And it's just not going to work for my particular industry or where I am in terms of the area, the type of work that I do. One of the things that you need to make sure you understand is that SBA considers the totality of the circumstance in whether an individual is considered an employee or not. So you have a link there to a size policy statement number 1, and also you're going to have a link to how IRS looks at individuals that perhaps may be contractors, 1099s, which I often refer to, but they may be considered employees. And you need to be very aware of that because someone that I pay as a 1099 may be considered an employee depending on the totality of the circumstance, and we'll cover that in a minute. Volunteers, those people that I'm not paying or that I have deferred compensation, are not going to be considered employees. And if an individual has an interest, ownership interest in the company, and works at least 40 hours per month, that owner will be considered an employee, whether that owner receives compensation or not. Now, reside means to live in a primary residence at least 180 days or as a currently registered voter with an intent to live there indefinitely. There is more information about this in our frequently asked questions. There's a lot of frequently asked questions regarding residency that if you had not read yet, I would encourage you to look at. So let's look at an example. This example really illustrates how things get a little bit convoluted when we're looking at the 35%. So this is the fact pattern. We have a company. It is in the IT services. So if you are in a service, construction service, you know that you're going to have employees working in job sites. But remember, when you're looking at that 35% requirement, you don't worry about where the employee works. In this example, it says that the headquarters is located in an urban area that is not a hub zone, according to the map. This sentence, because we're calculating 35%, this second sentence obviously is irrelevant because it's talking about the office, the headquarters, and we want to find out about the residency requirement of the employees. Then it goes to say that the two owners and an administrative support person spend the majority of their work hours there. Again, this is irrelevant because we don't worry about really where they work. But it gives us a sense of how many employees we have. So in here, we can start making a note that we have two owners and an administrative support. So we have a total of 3 people there. And let's assume that these people are working at least the 40 hours a month. Then we have across the street, Qualified Census Tract is a government facility where 6 engineers perform contract-specific work. Again, irrelevant because at this moment, we're not worried about where they work. However, it gives us an indication that we have 6 more employees. So we're going to add another 6 to the 3 that we added earlier. Now in here, this sentence, the owners and the administrative support all live in a hub zone a few miles away. Excellent. So we have 3 right there. There are 6 employees in the government site. Again, irrelevant. One of them is part-time and works only 20 hours every week. This is important to know because 20 hours every week, that means that this person works at least 80 hours a month, which works over 40 hours a month. So I'm going to count this part-timer as an employee. And only one of the 6 employees who work at the government site resides in a hub zone. So it seems out of 9 employees, 6 plus 3, I have 4 that are residing in a hub zone. So the question is, does this company meet the hub zone requirement? And as we see, yes, because we basically multiply 9 times 35%. And I'm going to need 3.15. And the regulations tell me that I have to round up. And I do have 4 individuals that reside in a hub zone. So the company does meet the requirement. Again, we do not consider where the employees work when calculating the 35% residency requirement. Now, when does an independent contractor is considered an employee? we need to, as I said, we need to look at the circumstances, what this individual does. Are they providing services that ordinarily these services are provided by employees? There's no magic or set number of factors that is going to make the particular worker an employee or an independent contractor. And not one factor alone, unfortunately, stands in making this determination. So let's look at an example. We have a company that utilizes 3 independent contractors. And regardless of whether the firm labels these individuals as independent contractors or not, you, an SBA, still need to determine whether we should consider these individuals as independent contractors. So what's going to happen is, let's look at an example of an independent contractor that we are going to consider an employee. And these are the facts. We have an employee that she is getting paid is a 1099 for a particular number of months. She does contract management, bid and proposal support, acts as a program manager. She does not have a signed contract with the firm. She acts as a liaison for the firm with the customers to ensure the smooth delivery of products, services. And she works out of her home in Anchorage, Alaska. She does not have any other clients. And at the end of each month, she logs her hours into the firm's system. The firm also has issued a business card to her, and this particular 1099 employee uses an email address that is provided by the firm. So with those facts, the result is that that particular independent contractor will be considered as an employee, because everything that points is the type of work that this employee does is normally performed with other firms by an employee. That individual doesn't have a contract with the firm, doesn't have other customers. It does complete, instead of billing the firm via an invoice, is actually using the timekeeping of the company. And the company does keep track of the hours. The individual is getting paid in hourly increments for the work completed. Now, versus if we look at this other example where an independent contractor would not be considered an employee, in this case we have an individual that does have a contract. He does work out of his home, but he does have other clients. He does invoice the company. He uses his own business cards. And provides bookkeeping services. Now, one argument could be made that employees, this is something that employees in some firms do provide bookkeeping services too, but all the other factors point towards being more of an arm's length agreement here. And this particular person, because of those facts, having his own business cards, having other customers, invoicing the firm, having a contract delineating the work involved, provides more of an argument that this individual is an independent contractor that should not be included as an employee. When we look at the definition of principal office, we need to look at, we are basically counting heads. We do not pay attention to where the employee lives. We pay attention to where the employee works. Remember, employees, those that work at least 40 hours a month. So we're going to take a look at where the greatest number work. And if I have service or construction, I am basically going to look at where this job sites, they're working in job sites. So for example, if I have a janitorial firm, I have 100 employees, 90 of them work at job sites, and 10 are my overhead. I am going to take a look at those 10 and determine where they work from. If I only have one office and that one office is in a hub zone, it's going to be relatively easy. Then I'm going to meet that principal office. But if I have 2 offices and I have 10 employees that are my overhead that do not work in job sites, I am going to have to be very careful and make sure that I have more of those 10 working out of my hub zone location than less. And I have to have more, not equal, because if I have 5 in one location that is not a hub zone and 5 that is in my hub zone location, I'm not going to meet the requirement of the principal office, because it is where the greatest number of the my employees at any one location perform their work. The example here, same situation. Again, there's a lot of things here intended for confusing us, to confuse us in terms of where people live. But we have the same example as before. And what we are looking at is where do they work. So here we have 3 people, the 2 owners and the administrative support, spending the majority of their work time in the headquarters, which is not in a hub zone. Now remember, principal office may or may not be the headquarters. Principal office is literally the place where the greatest number of the employees work from. So it could be the headquarters, but it does not have to be. So these 3 people, owners plus the administrative support, work in headquarters. Headquarters is not in a hub zone. So I have 3 people in a non-hub zone office. Then I have 6 engineers, but they're working in a government facility. A government facility is a site that I, as the owner of the firm, do not control. It's a job site. So in this case, obviously, they do not meet the hub zone requirement. Because this is a government site, I'm going to exclude those for the purpose of the principal office. Can a virtual office qualify as a principal office? If I have, for example, an example is that if I have a company that signed a 6-month contract, and the contract basically delineates that the company is going to obtain mail, faxes, courier services, a receptionist, and I'm going to be able to use 16 hours of a private office on boardroom. Am I going to qualify? If this virtual office qualifies as a principal office? Well, the one thing that you're going to notice is 16 hours. Even if this virtual office is in a hub zone, it's not going to qualify because I cannot even have the minimum amount of hours of my employee that, for example, if I have an employee that 40 hours a month, I cannot have that employee working from there because my agreement only covers 16 hours use of an office. So as you see here, this virtual office does not meet the principal office requirement because an employee, which includes the owner, remember, cannot work at the office for at least 40 hours per month. The ownership and control is important to remember. The qualification is 51% owned and controlled by a U.S. citizen. That ownership must be direct and unconditional. A person is a human being, a citizen is a person, and so it's not an entity. So for example, in this example here, we have a woman that happens, Betty Smith, happens to be a U.S. citizen. She owns a corporation, and in turn, the corporation owns a limited liability company, which she wants to certify. She wants to obtain certification for the limited liability company. Obviously, this particular fact pattern is going to fail the ownership and control requirement because there is no direct ownership. As you see here, not directly owned and unconditionally owned by Betty Smith. Maintaining the hub zone certification means basically staying in compliance. And that's what we've been covering today, is making sure that you develop strategies that would allow you to remain in compliance. The companies must certify every time they submit a bid, they receive an award for a hub zone contract. They're literally certifying to the federal government that they are in compliance. So that means the companies need to do their own self-evaluation, and they need to notify the SBA if there's any material changes. There is a recertification every 3 years, but again, there is no limit to the length of time a firm may qualify as a hub zone firm, so long as they're maintaining the eligibility. The best practices are long-term and revolving strategies that define how the firm is going to be and remain competitive, particularly how they're going to keep that employee residency requirement at least at 50% or more. This is something that we see on companies that have been certified for 10 years and up. We see them maintaining that requirement much higher. They also watch for have some map changes. And as they expand operations, if they need to open up other offices, they look for offices that are in hub zones, no redesignated HubZones. They're looking for HubZone areas where they can locate second offices in the event that one office loses designation. And they have a strategy in place as to how to perhaps even keep the office that loses HubZone designation, but yet maintain the other one as a principal office, so long as obviously the greatest number of the employees must work from there. They maintain a list of potential hires in case one of the HubZone residents quits, and in this way the firms do not risk decertification. This is an important note that we have here just to show you that even though the certification can potentially be indefinite, the median number of years in the program for firms has been only 4 years. However, those firms that have kept the certification for a lot longer than that are the ones that are reaping the benefits of the program, obviously, because they're getting contracts, HubZone set-asides, and they're rather successful. Now, we're coming to an end here. In this particular slide contains the resources and tools. There are hyperlinks to the sites that we've been talking about, and as well as partners and local resources that you can go and consult for additional information. We also have here additional information that you can contact our office, and we offer HubZone office hours on Tuesdays and Thursdays that you can call in. Is an opportunity to learn a little bit more about the program. So let's open it up for questions.
Yes, we do have a few questions, quite a few. First off, what happens if you aren't able to win a contract for the duration of your certification?
Nothing. The certification itself is not contingent on contracts. So it's up to the company to determine, to do their own self-evaluation and determine whether it is worth it for them to maintain the certification. If it is, sometimes companies may not be obtaining contracts as primes, but they're obtaining contracts as subcontractors, and their primes actually are getting the credit of being able to subcontract with HubZone firms. So we do see some companies that are not getting contracts through the federal government that are set aside for HubZones, but we see companies that are also very successful in the subcontracting arena with the certification. Now, one item that is very important to remember is that when a company submits an offer of a HubZone set-aside, let's say for the Department of Health and Human Services, and they obtain that HubZone contract, their regulations allow that HubZone certified firm to fall below the 35% residency requirement. That's something that it is in the law. They can fall below the 35% so long as they're making attempts to maintain that requirement. And the reason for being able to be allowed to fall below that is because obviously they need to ramp up hiring in order to deliver the services or the products that they were contracted to deliver. So the law allows the firms to fall below, so that if SBA does an audit on the company and finds them to be, instead of 35% or 50% residency requirement, it finds the company to be at 29%, the company needs to provide evidence that they're performing on a HubZone contract, and they need to provide evidence that they are making attempts to maintain that 35%, showing us advertisements, job fairs that they're attending, etc. However, when the companies are receiving subcontract work, they cannot avail themselves of this particular disposition. So it's very important to maintain that distinction. Next question, please.
Okay, 2 or 3 year recertification?
It's a 3-year recertification. And basically, the SBA issues the recertification notice to the firm. So, for example, if a company obtains the certification on January 1st, 2010, they may still be certified and continue to be certified. For example, we're in November 2013, and perhaps SBA has now issued the notices of recertification. However, it's very important. Remember the material change. The companies are responsible, even if they are certified, to maintain compliance and to inform the federal government if they fell out of compliance. Usually what we see is when a company has felt out of compliance, they submit a voluntarily decertification. And when they're decertified, they can reapply 90 days after they have been decertified, provided obviously that they meet the qualifications. So this is not a one-time certification. Companies can voluntarily decertify, and they can subsequently in the future reapply when they feel that they're in a stronger position to maintain the certification. Next question, please.
How can you determine if your business is in a hub zone?
Basically, I would advise go to the HubZone website and go to the HubZone Maps link, and that will direct you to, will give you instructions on how to determine that. You basically are going to be able to enter the address, and the results in the map will tell you whether it is and is not. But I would advise make sure that you're also looking at the graphic just to make sure that it's plotting, that the map is plotting that address correctly in the map. Next question, please.
Okay. Can we have locations throughout the country with employees in various hub zones? We have operations in multiple locations. Can our various divisions located in various hub zones utilize the program individually?
Not individually, but for example, if we have a company that has locations all over the country, are performing contracts all over the country, this is a national certification. So I could have multiple offices that are in different hub zones, and basically for the purpose of this program, we would use the principal office will be that one that has the greatest number of employees working from. And then employees, they can be, let's say a company has a principal office in Providence, Rhode Island, and another office in Anchorage, Alaska. And employees in Alaska and Rhode Island, so long as they're meeting the requirements that at least 35% of the employees reside in a hub zone, the principal office is located in a hub zone, they can apply and qualify and maintain the certification. It's not a local certification, it's a national certification. Next question, please.
Okay. We are an EDWOSB recent graduate from the 8A program. We just moved our main office into a hub zone and would like to get a hub zone certification. Our company has formed a wholly owned LLC subsidiary, i.e. 100% of the LLC is owned by our company. Question, does a corporate-owned subsidiary qualify for a hub zone certification? And if not, will transferring ownership of the subsidiary to natural persons take care of this requirement?
It's hard to give you a perfect answer, obviously. That type of ownership structure has very valid basis. So I would recommend that you consult with your attorney or accountant. But obviously, this type of ownership of the subsidiary being owned by a corporation, that subsidiary is not going to qualify because it's not directly owned and controlled at least 51% by U.S. citizens that have to be people, that have to be persons. So that's the answer, but I would advise you very strongly to consult with the professionals that set the ownership structure to make sure that you understand all the other implications of changing ownership may bring to the company. Next question, please.
Does employee include 1,099 contractors who regularly work for the company?
You need to, earlier on in here, there is a slide that I would recommend for you to take a look at, and there's hyperlinks in this presentation that you're going to learn a little bit more. You need to take a look at the totality of the circumstance, what type of work that employee does. So I would recommend that you review the previous slides and also go to the links from the IRS and the size policy statement number 1 to learn a little bit more how to evaluate whether a 1099 is going to be considered an employee or not. Next question, please.
Under what circumstances do you use the input coordinator?
When it is the coordinate input is used when I'm having problems locating a particular address or when the map locates an address but plots it incorrectly, not exactly where the building is. I would recommend that you use the coordinate input. And let's take 2 more questions before we end.
Okay. If an owner works less than 40 hours a month and they are not salaried, do they factor into the hub zone / non-hub zone employee ratio?
No, an employee owner that works less than 40 hours a month is not considered an employee because he does not work the required minimum amount of hours. Next, last question, please.
The 35% requirement requires that 35% of the company lives in a hub zone and at least one employee working a minimum of 40 hours a month in the hub zone, correct?
No. The requirement is that at least 35% of all the employees must reside in a hub zone. And I have to have the greatest number of the employees working out of my principal office, so that if I have a construction company, for example, I have to have I cannot have all the employees working in job sites and having that principal office vacant. And that defeats the purpose of the program, which is to spur economic development in these areas. So I recommend that this particular participant review again the definition of principal office and the slides that pertain to that, particularly the example that may also help. Well, thank you so much for the time you've taken. There's a lot of other questions that are here, and we will be answering them and transmitting them to the group so that everybody can understand and learn from this webinar. Thank you.